Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Unbalanced with me, Cerys Davage, and Happy New Year, happy 2026. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you've all had a lovely Christmas, hope you've all had a lovely New Year so far, and I just can't believe we're in a new year. Let's go, 2026. My Christmas decorations are still up because I am pre-recording this, and hopefully by the time I come back from being up north over Christmas, spending time with Tristan's family, I will have gotten rid of these decorations. But I thought I would pre-prepare this episode so that it's ready to go. This episode is going to be about a topic that I've spoken about before, but I haven't for a while, and I have some new thoughts on it, all about being a celiac. So I talk a lot about my limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, but I also am a celiac, and this condition tends to take the back seat when it comes to just life in general, because my LGMD takes up so much more of my time. It takes up so much more anxiety. And with celiac, I'd say that it's pretty straightforward, being that there is a treatment for celiac disease, which is just to not eat gluten. But it's not as straightforward as that. And there are a lot of things that go into being a celiac, and there's a lot of things that I want to share about the reality of being a celiac that maybe you wouldn't know if you're not a celiac, and things that maybe are useful to consider, you know, if you end up meeting someone with celiac disease, if you know someone with celiac disease, but also just having an autoimmune disease or some kind of allergy or something like that. I think this will be a good episode to educate yourself a little bit on, I'd say. I have got a coffee with me this morning that I'm going to be sipping throughout this episode, and I never thought I'd say this for this time of year, but it's so sunny outside that I've had to actually close the curtains a little bit because the sunlight was directly onto me and the camera couldn't pick up a thing. I just looked like a ghost. So I've had to close the curtains a little bit, but honestly, I'm leaning back right now. You can see the sun is like directly in my eyes. And yeah, anyway, I thought it'd be nice if I could still be able to see by the end of this episode. I don't want this sun to blind me. Because I'm pre-recording this episode, I'm not going to do a life update or anything like that. I'm just going to get straight into this episode. I am very excited to talk about this because I've wanted to talk about the reality of being a celiac for a long time, and the more I put it off, the more things that happen to me that I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to talk about this on the podcast. So as you may know, recently I was glutened, and this was about the first time in about a year that I was glutened. You never think it's going to happen when it actually does. I think I always have that anxiety that I'm going to get glutened, but it's always the time that I never have a doubt that I'm going to be glutened that I do end up getting gluten, so that's typical. But I do want to start with myth busting, because I think we have come a long way in knowing what celiac disease is. When I was diagnosed at 7 years old back in 2008, people had no idea what celiac disease was. People didn't know what gluten was, and that was a tough time to try and educate people wherever we went, and to try and make sure that, you know, they knew about cross-contamination and things like that. More and more people are getting diagnosed, which is amazing, and more people know about it, even if they have no connections to it themselves. But I think there's still a long way to go when it comes to actually knowing what celiac disease is. I think a lot of people still connect it to either it being a choice or an allergy. So an allergy is obviously very different. An allergy, you tend to have a reaction straight away. Obviously, in more severe cases like nut allergies, you know, it can escalate really quickly and it can be really, really dangerous. Whereas, you know, for maybe other allergies, you get like a rash or something like that, but you just take an antihistamine and then it goes. Unfortunately, celiac disease is not like that at all. So it's not an allergy, it's an autoimmune disease, which means that it may take more than just a few minutes to react to the gluten. So the gluten needs to pass through the actual small intestine first, and that's where the antibodies will detect that there's gluten, the sirens will go off, and the body will try and get rid of the gluten as soon as possible. But for me, the reaction doesn't start until about 2 hours after I've eaten that food. So for me, I always have like a mental clock of having a 2 hour mark. Like if I've eaten something and it's been 2 hours after that, I know I'm clear. You know, if I'm not feeling sick after 2 hours, I'm good to go. Another misconception is people mix up celiac disease and just having a gluten intolerance. Both are obviously severe, both have their own side effects, both have their own severities, but celiac disease is a lot more strict than gluten intolerance. You know, you often hear people with some kind of an intolerance, like lactose intolerance, be like, oh, I can get away with eating just a little bit as long as it's in moderation. And that's not the case with celiac disease. If you've got a gluten intolerance, from what I understand, you can get away with eating stuff that's been cross-contaminated. For example, if the chips are gluten-free, but they're fried in the same fryer as something with gluten, they're still fine. Whereas for a celiac would not touch that because it's been cross-contaminated. I think with a celiac, one crumb can make someone sick, but if you've got an intolerance, it's not so bad. It's, you know, you can kind of get away with a little bit here and there, but the symptoms aren't great, so, you know, they tend to avoid it altogether. But yeah, I guess nowadays celiac disease tends to be a bit more of a trend, or maybe not celiac itself. I think just going gluten-free is a trend right now. People are saying that it's healthier. People saying, you know, they want to cut down on carbs and stuff like that because it's healthier. I just want to say that going gluten-free doesn't actually mean you're healthier. Cutting down on carbs is a different thing than going gluten-free. And for me, as someone who can't eat gluten and therefore can't eat a lot of carbs anyway, like bread or brown pasta and things like that, I'm naturally fibre deficient. I'm not eating as much fibre as I should because there's natural fibre in a lot of things with gluten in it. So you may cut gluten out of your life to be healthier, but you're actually cutting a lot of goodness as well. So yeah, that's kind of still a bit of a slippery slope right now, I think. It's still being explored, it's still being tested with. Like I mentioned in my last episode, wellness is a huge thing. So I think people assume that going gluten-free is like a wellness thing. And I know a lot of people cut down on gluten because they think that gluten is bad for them. But I'm like, if gluten is bad for you, that probably means that you've got celiac disease or you've got gluten intolerance. So my advice is, you know, unofficial advice, but this is actually official advice from Coeliac UK and lots of other big celiac charities, medical professionals. If you think you have some kind of reaction to gluten when you eat it, my advice would be, don't go gluten-free straight away. Go and get tested first whilst you're still eating gluten so that the test can actually detect the problem. So just going to put that out there right at the beginning of the episode, just in case. I think people are like, okay, I'll go gluten-free for a bit and see how I feel. And then they feel better and then they don't want to go back to eating gluten to get tested. So they end up just staying gluten-free without like an official diagnosis or anything. I think there's still a bit of a misconception around that. So I had to mention that. Another myth I'm going to bust before we move on to the next kind of topic is that people think like, oh, a little bit won't hurt, like surely it's not that serious. And I've had a lot of cases where, you know, I've eaten out and people don't understand the severity of, you know, gluten-free and cross-contamination. So they're like, well, you know, if like I don't need to change my gloves, like it's fine. And I'm like, no, I promise you, even if you can't see the gluten, it's there and it is as serious as you think it is. So yes, a little bit will hurt, and I have been sick, and I'm a prime example of being sick from cross-contamination, like just a little crumb. So yes, it is a real thing. The next thing I'm going to move on to is something that I've been dying to talk about, which is the mental load that celiac disease has. You know, it affects us mentally so much, and I'm not going as far as saying that it gives us a mental health condition or anything like that, but I do have a lot of anxieties and trust issues when it comes to eating out or just eating outside the comfort of my own home. So wherever I go, I'm constantly worried about everything I eat. How has this been prepared? Has this been prepared with separate utensils on a separate chopping board, clean hands, clean utensils? Has this been prepared in a celiac friendly way, or are they just advertising it as gluten-free and it's actually not being prepared with that kind of care? And I haven't always had this kind of anxiety. It's only because my trust has been broken time and time again that I feel like I just can't trust anyone now or anywhere, even if they reassure me that it is completely gluten-free. Absolutely, I promise, like every care has been taken, like every precaution has been made. I have still been glutened after being told that. So yes, I've put my trust in people and restaurants and pubs and different places, and they've let me down. So it's so hard to gauge whether something is gluten-free or not, because unfortunately I can't just take someone's word for it. And it could easily be, it could be something as easy as like a mix-up. They have actually done something gluten-free, but when I'm being served, it's been switched with someone's gluten meal, for example. So after my trust has been broken so many times, I have that severe anxiety of like, oh, like, is this really worth it? Like, am I really going to risk like my body? Am I going to risk this just for a nice meal? And sometimes I've passed on stuff, like if I'm going to an event and they cater gluten-free, I would just take my own food, because I don't want that extra mental load of having to worry about that as well. I want to just be able to enjoy my day without having to worry about this extra thing at the back of my mind as well. So sometimes taking a packed lunch is necessary. And I remember growing up, once I had my diagnosis, taking my packed lunch absolutely everywhere. Every school trip, every birthday party I went to, it was all kind of gluten-free packed lunch. And yeah, I would get made fun of, but it's worth it for, not having to risk being sick. And my friends have seen, what it's like once I've been gluten. Like, they've seen it, trust me, and it's just not pretty at all. And it's never ever worth it. I think people are like, oh, if you just have like a little bit, or if an accident happens, you get sick and then you move on. It's a lot more than that. It's not just the there and then when you're sick. During that sickness, like, I'm sorry if you're eating right now or drinking. I'm literally drinking my coffee at the same time, but it's literally the worst feeling. Like, I would not wish that on anyone. It's horrible. Because it's inevitable and it's out of your control, and you know what's about to happen. But also after that, you feel weak for ages. Your stomach feels just so out of place. Every time you eat a meal or a snack or something, you can feel a bit dodgy. And I've probably mentioned this before, but it does take months for a celiac's gut to heal after eating gluten. So my gut is probably in bits right now. I'm trying everything I can to help, but the only way to nourish it is a gluten-free diet for me. I have to just keep on living, keep on eating, and just let my body do its job and repair the gut eventually in its time. My lipstick is going to fade the more I drink this coffee. Another thing I thought of about, the mental toll that having celiac disease can take is the decision fatigue. Say you want to organise a social event with a group of friends or something, or with work. People often let you choose as the celiac, because they're like, well, if you choose somewhere, they're guaranteed to do something for everyone else, but as long as they have something for you. But that is a lot of pressure on me, because, I might choose somewhere that says they do gluten-free, but actually they don't. Or I choose somewhere that I know is safe for me, but it's actually not that great for everyone else. So that can be a bit stressful as well. I'm not saying it's like a huge impact on my life, but it is little things like that. And say you go to a restaurant and they have pizza and pasta, both advertised as gluten-free, they have gluten-free options. Which one am I going to go for that's the safest option? I think a lot of restaurants nowadays, I think almost every single one I go to, they now have to say, I think it must be a new rule, they now have to say, we can't guarantee that there won't be any cross-contamination. And that's really annoying as a celiac, because I don't know whether they mean they genuinely can't guarantee the cross-contamination because they use the same utensils for everything, they use the same baking trays, they use the same cookers and fryers. That means cross-contamination, absolutely. Or are they saying that by, we're trying the best we can, we're using everything separately, but there will be gluten handled in the kitchen as well? Which, for me, that sounds better, because I'm not expecting you to have a whole separate kitchen for gluten-free. I'm not expecting you to have a separate kitchen for every single allergen and, dietary need. That's just unrealistic. But as long as you're taking the right precautions, you're putting my pizza on a separate tray above the other pizzas in the oven. The same oven as other gluten pizzas is fine. And I don't know where this has come from, but every time I go out for gluten-free pizza, they warn me that it's in the same oven as the gluten pizzas. And I'm like, I know, that's fine. Like, they're like, yeah, but, gluten is airborne and, gluten will be flying around. But I'm like, as long as it's on a separate tray, it's fine. And I cook the same pizzas as my family in our oven at home, and that's fine. I just think restaurants and dining places are trying to be so careful now with, the way they advertise their food as gluten-free, because they're afraid of getting sued if someone does end up having an accident and a cross-contamination fiasco and end up getting sick. But it's just so hard to gauge whether they actually mean there is a risk of cross-contamination or whether they're just saying we can't guarantee just to cover their backs. So that has been like an extra new frustration and causes so much anxiety when you go out. I don't know if you're a celiac watching this. I don't know whether you feel the same or whether you feel safer, because they're saying this. But for me, it's really frustrating because when people warn me, as soon as I sit down in a restaurant, we can't guarantee that things are gluten-free, I have to go into an in-depth conversation with them about, okay, but how is it prepared? How is it made? What utensils are you using? Are you cleaning in between? Are you using separate gloves? Are you using separate boards? Just things like that. And usually they have to go, check with the chef in the back, and that holds up the entire table because I'm the problem. I'm the one that needs to, triple check that things are gluten-free and the way that it's made. It's almost as if I need to be in that kitchen to watch exactly how they make it, because one little mistake and I'm screwed. So that for me is like my biggest anxiety at the moment when I go out as a celiac, is just knowing, I'm almost expecting restaurants to say now, like, oh, by the way, we can't guarantee, have you read our allergen statement? Have you read that, if you do get gluten, then you can't sue us, kind of thing. But I'm like, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean? Oh, anyway, yeah, I needed to get that rant out there because I don't think people realize the mental toll that takes on a celiac, because once they say that they can't guarantee, even if they say that they're doing everything they can to make it celiac friendly, whilst I'm eating the food and for 2 hours afterwards, I'm going to feel so nervous. And then sometimes that'll trigger like a placebo feeling sick effect in me. Like, oh my goodness, I've eaten gluten, like convincing myself mentally that I have because I'm just not sure. And I just feel really, really nervous and my heart is beating fast, and I'm like, oh, it's just not a nice feeling, already having a very limited menu as a celiac and then having that worry on top of it that this might not actually be gluten-free. So that's the reality of being a celiac. One thing I do love though is when you go to a restaurant and there's actually more than one option on the menu, which is great, because usually I'm like, I can't be fussy, I just need to eat whatever's on the menu that's gluten-free. But actually, there's quite a few to choose from these days. Restaurants are getting much better, and so are supermarkets. Not every single supermarket chain offers like a whole gluten-free range, so I still need to be careful and mindful. I tend to stick to the same places because I know that they do gluten-free. And I feel so much better just cooking at home and buying things that are gluten-free from supermarkets that are separately packaged, because I know that they've gone through those procedures to ensure that they are safe for celiacs. So I do love cooking at home. I do love Tristan cooking at home for me, and he's really, really good with being gluten-free as well. I think dating can be a problem. I'm luckily kind of wifed off almost, but I know that dating would be a huge problem for celiacs as well, because they not only are trying to get to know someone maybe for the first time, they've got that mental anxiety kind of ticking in the background of like, oh, am I going to make it out of this date alive, not getting glutened, but also, having to make decisions on places that are gluten-free, or having to triple check with the waiter, how is this prepared in front of like a stranger that you want to get to know. That can be a bit tough as well. So I understand that having these awkward situations out don't just affect us mentally, it can affect our relationships, it can affect our friendships, our families, and just dating as well. And I'm very fortunate that I have a fiance who is understanding of my gluten-free lifestyle. He completely gets it now. We have been together over 6 years, so you'd think that he's gotten the hang of it. But he, would eat gluten-free pasta with me, just to avoid doing like a separate pan of like pasta, for example. We would have our own things, if we were to eat fajitas, he'd have his own wraps, because there are some things that you still have to draw a line on, like gluten-free bread is getting better, absolutely. I would never force a non-celiac to eat gluten-free bread, because I'm very well aware that gluten bread is much nicer. Normal bread is much, much nicer. So, we have our compromises, we have our separate, air fryer drawers and things like that. And I feel completely safe when Tristan is cooking because, we're used to that lifestyle of doing things that are gluten-free, and to be honest, most of our meals that we do is naturally gluten-free anyway. So yeah, I'm very fortunate in that sense. I often feel very guilty if people go out of their way to make sure that something is gluten-free for me, and I don't know why. Like, I just have that guilt, like, oh, you really didn't have to. Like, I understand that I'm a very difficult person because I'm a celiac. You really didn't have to like do that for me, but I know I would do that for other people. I know I'd do that for my friends. So I guess I need to just get over that. But there's also that element of, because I'm a people pleaser, I feel terrible trying to explain to someone that, no, you can't just give me an ice cream straight from the same ice cream that you've been serving everyone else that's cross-contaminated from the cones. You do have to get me a separate tub of ice cream, or you do have to get the ice cream from somewhere clean. And I hate that. Like, I hate having to explain to waiters and, servers or whatever that I have to be picky. I have to be fussy as a celiac, because otherwise I'll get really sick. And especially if people don't take it seriously, or if they don't understand the severity of cross-contamination or being a celiac and eating gluten-free. I hate being picky. I hate looking fussy, especially if I'm like with other people as well. Like, the last thing I want is for people to judge me because I'm like over explaining how celiac disease works. And I know that, most people would be really understanding and want to learn, but I feel like it's just not my job. Like, I don't want to have to explain celiac disease over and over again to different people every time. Like, but I'm like, look it up. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not here to educate you. And it's the same with having a disability. People love to overstep and ask you really intrusive questions, but I think we need to remind ourselves that it's not our job to educate people. If they really want to know the severities of being a celiac or what happens when a celiac eats gluten, you can look that up. You don't need to know. I don't need to explain that to you. You could easily watch this episode and be like, why don't you just eat in then? Why don't you just not go out to eat? That's not fair, is it? If people have the freedom to be able to go out and try new restaurants, try different foods that maybe they wouldn't do at home or can't do at home, and try new cuisines, it's not fair to say to a celiac, just don't go out. It's just absurd. But I think we are quite good at balancing eating in and going out. Takeaways, on the other hand, I barely ever explore. I just stick to what I know. I know Domino's do gluten-free, Honest Burger do gluten-free, which is amazing, and that's pretty much it. Like Chinese takeaway, I wouldn't really touch because I know that everything is kind of fried and cooked and prepared together. All the sauces have wheat in them, so that's a kind of a no-go. So I do already have to miss out on a lot of, luxuries that people without celiac disease can enjoy, and I want to be able to go out and enjoy going out for a meal with friends. I don't want to have to miss out on social events just because I'm too worried that I'll be fed gluten. Like, I still want to be a part of that. It's just something we need to get a bit better at, I think, is knowing which places are actually gluten-free or not, or which places are saying that they're fine but they're not, and some people are saying that they're not fine when they actually are. I think a lot of people are scared now and just want to cover their own backs, but they're actually probably fine. They're just overthinking it maybe. But yeah, I do want to still enjoy, going out and eating and trying different foods. So it's something I will continue to do, but it's just unfortunate that I have to take so many extra precautions and inconvenience maybe a lot of people. But I'm hoping that by having to explain to people or inconvenience people, I'm also educating them. Even though, like I said, it's not really my job, but I'm happy to do that so that they can understand maybe celiac disease a little bit better for the next time they approach someone with celiac disease. There's also that additional cost as well of being a celiac. Like, I know I'm very fortunate living in Wales that I do get some gluten-free things on prescription, but personally, I haven't had gluten-free things on prescription for a while because it's just a lot of admin, and maybe first world problems, whatever, it's not that big a deal. It doesn't take that much effort. But as someone with a disability, it's already, energy consuming to have to go to the GP every time to get a prescription, fill it out, go to the pharmacist to drop it off, return in a week or two to collect everything, and usually the boxes are so big that I can't carry them myself, so I need someone else to come with me, or I need to send someone else to get them. That is a lot of work for me, and it may not sound like that to you, but now that I'm living independently, it's so much easier. Even though it's more expensive, it's just a lot less time and energy consuming to just add a gluten-free loaf of bread onto the existing Tesco delivery shop that I'm going to get straight to my door. That's just actually a lot easier for me. And yes, I could go out of my way to save that extra £2.50 per loaf of bread, but I guess I just need to balance out, my time and energy and money as well. Yeah, it's just annoying because it's not a choice, and it's literally the only option I have is to buy gluten-free bread that's like 3 times more expensive than a normal loaf of bread. I'm going to wrap up this episode here. I think we've learned a lot. Being a celiac essentially means that I need to advocate for myself a lot everywhere I go, because if I don't, I could harm myself by accidentally eating gluten and getting really sick. So it does take a lot of energy, it takes a lot of effort, and it's a very thorough job to be a celiac because you need to kind of run a fine comb through absolutely everything, metaphorically of course. It's never worth it eating a crumb or two or just trying a little bit. Never ever ever. You could give me the best chocolate cake in the world or like the biggest and most amazing meal and I would not touch it because it's never worth it. I'm not new to being a celiac, so this is just something I've gotten used to over the years. It's just frustrating that it's still happening, that I'm still getting glutened every now and again, and it's completely out of my control. And it's frustrating that I do have trust issues now, but I know it's not just me that's going through this, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it today. I know that there are other people that have the same feelings and the same thoughts and the same experiences as me, so I hope that this brings you some comfort a little bit, that you're not alone. It's not you. It's never our fault. If we're being served gluten and then we're sick afterwards and we suffer the consequences, it's never our fault. Please remember that. But yeah, you're not alone, and I hope I'm not either. So if you can relate to anything I said today, please let me know, because that'll actually help me out a lot, knowing that I'm not the only one that's going through this, and we'll get through it. It'll be fine. Life is still good. We just need to take a few extra steps. That's all it is, just to make sure that we're still living a good life. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned something. If you can't relate to it, I hope you were educated and that you can take this information just to be a bit more mindful and to just help and be understanding of other celiacs. It's not easy always, and if you know a celiac, then you know exactly what it's like and how tough it can be. So just keep being there for them. That's my advice, and never underestimate the power of advocating for yourself and triple checking every meal. It's annoying, but it's necessary, I want to talk more about being a celiac and living a gluten-free life on my social media. So if you have any topics that you want me to talk about, anything you want me to show, any meals that we prep, things like that, please let me know. I want to branch out more into the gluten-free world online, because I feel like I've done it with the disability side, but I know that there are so many amazing gluten-free creators out there that I want to connect with and get tips from and get advice from. Even though I'm not new to the celiac game at all, I'm very, very used to it by now. I want to meet those other celiacs and, gain more of a perspective on it, because I've got my routines now, but I want to branch out. I want to be able to find more interesting things to do and meals to cook and places to go that I know have been recommended by other celiacs. I have actually done an episode before with Laura from Celiac Sisters that I really recommend you check out. She's an absolute gluten-free queen, and we just yap about being celiacs together. Also, both of my sisters are celiacs, so check out my episode with them if you haven't. Thank you so much to Cure Algae and D2I for sponsoring this podcast. I am very excited for this year ahead. I have some amazing guests lined up for you guys that I can't wait for you to get to know. And if you have any topics that you want me to discuss this year, send me a message on Cerys Davage on Instagram or TikTok, or Unbalanced Podcast on Instagram, or leave a comment below this episode in the little Q&A box. I would love to know what you want me to talk about, what you want me to chat about, answer any questions, any dilemmas. Let me know. I am here for you, and this is exactly what the podcast is about, is to bring everyone together and to make sure that we're not alone in this. So I can't wait to spend the next year with you, and the next year after that, and the year after that, and I will speak to you guys very soon. But until then, have a lovely week. Bye.